So, Jeff, it's amazing to see the Trump administration come out of the starting blocks, like fireworks. And I think what we've seen here the past week is that it's not just domestically. I mean, domestically has been fantastic. All these executive orders, getting rid of genital mutilation, and everything else that we've seen, deregulation and Doge, and so on and so forth. But I think this past week we've also seen that it's the exact same path, the path of like, let's just go forge ahead and do things in international relations. And of course, the whole thing that happened with Zelensky, the realization that the focus is really China and the Russian-China alliance, the fact that Europe, what's Europe? I mean, Europe is kind of has some ancestral ties, but how's Europe so important for national security? What have they got? Have they got raw materials? No, I mean, they got nice cars, coffee machines, whatever, but that's kind of it. So all of that is come into focus. Whereas in the past, I guess it was like, oh, Europe, our allies, and no one then thinks sort of beyond that as just a label, allies, and then what, right? So I think it's amazing how both domestically and internationally, Trump and his team have. It seems like they spent the past 4 years just looking at everything and coming up with these amazing plans that just look at everything from first principles. No more like, oh, well, we've always done it in the past, or, oh, this is a nice label or whatever. Just first principles. What do we need? What's our national interest? What's important? How do we get there? And just kind of laid it all out and came up with, an amazing plan, even though, or especially because a lot of people are upset about it now. DC establishment types, Democrats, the media, the Europeans are particularly upset about it. But I'm just extremely impressed and very happy that we're seeing a repeat of the domestic kind of, not, of course, not in detail of what exactly is going on, but in terms of the impetus, in terms of the energy, in terms of having thought it through. We're seeing the same thing happen on the international side.
To me, in some respects, it's like Trump unfettered. We certainly saw hints of this in his first administration. He took us out of the Paris Climate Accord, etc. He pushed back on the UN. But a couple different things have evolved. First of all, you talked about Europe, being overplayed as our allies. Well, what they were is over the last 4 years, they were allies of the Biden administration. They've just increased this level of bureaucracy. It's not democracy, it's bureaucracy. And that's really all it is. And Trump, his whole foreign policy was stymied. It just can't be overstated enough how Russiagate distorted everything in terms of the United States approach to foreign policy. And for the first time, we have an opportunity to just throw those shackles off and just reset. Like you say, that the fact that we should be primarily worried about Russia aligning with China. That should have been our sort of supreme concern, like the driving force behind our foreign policy. And instead, that got more. It didn't just get cast to the side. Everything that we did drove Russia and China together. And so Trump is coming in. To me, it's not a different foreign policy. It's simply that he's got the power to do it. And now he's walking forward and he's kind of restructuring the entire landscape. And we're seeing that filter through to UK. They're still doing what they're doing. And Europe is up in arms, but it's spreading through below them on a populist level. So he's accomplishing a number of things. It's not just what may transpire between, getting this horrible, endless war, bringing it to an end, but it's also spreading, the increase of populism throughout Europe.
I agree with you. It's sort of the same, at least in principle, or at least in theory, but now it's actually being put into practice. And I think it all comes back to what J.D. Vance sort of, in an off-the-cuff remark, I'm sure he didn't intend it to be sort of the motto of the entire Trump 2.0 administration, but it has become that, which is, I don't really care, Margaret, when he was on with Margaret Brennan, that absolute total airhead, who was just blabbering some crap and, trying to do the emotional blackmail that they always do.
That was the death of emotional blackmail right in that moment. Right there, it died.
Exactly. And the same then goes for domestic and international. So where they just don't care. Whereas in Trump 1.0, he always had to be wary of anything to do with Russia because, oh my goodness, people are going to scream hysterically about collusion and Trump is a Russian agent and all this absolute rubbish that, tied him down during his first 4 years. And now it's just like, we're so beyond that. I don't care anymore. So in his first term, Trump actually did a lot of bad things to Russia in terms of sanctions and so on that were never reported because, well, he's the Russian agent. So, but why did he do those things? I'm sure partly because he wanted to show that all of that wasn't true. And then, of course, with Ukraine, he wasn't really able to do anything in his first term because as soon as he talked to Russia, they were in hysterics. As soon as he talked to Ukraine, they accused him. Remember, they accused Trump of extorting the poor little Zelensky and so on. He had absolutely no breathing room, wasn't able to do anything. But part of the reason for that is because there was still this semblance or this veneer of having to care about the emotional blackmail, having to care about what people say, having to care about the next day's headlines and so on and so forth. And now, as you say, that is out the window. We're in a new paradigm now. I don't really care, Margaret. It's over. You can emotionally blackmail me about Zelensky or this or that. I don't care.
Well, in terms of Russia, remember that like one of the first things that he did was make us a net exporter of energy in his first term. That's the last thing that Russia wanted to see happen. We started shipping, albeit in very small increments, but LNG into Europe, and that's an at the margin market. That was even just that little bit was damaging. But there's also another undercurrent to all this that's playing out right now, and is kind of the Russia collusion. We're seeing the other side of that because what was it? As you and I have talked about a million times, it was never really about Russia. It was about Ukraine. And, we're kind of seeing that come full circle now, where it's breaking this Russian narrative and it's addressing Ukraine head on and kind of walking into these talks. And Trump's frankly treating Zelensky rightly dismissively. Like you're just not even, the import that was given to you by Democrats and by the rhinos in Congress, that was always fake. I think I said something to the effect of Zelensky's like a micro oligarch run by larger oligarchs who are in turn run by the CIA. And that's kind of a, cliche little response, but by the same token, it kind of captures the larger elements that are going on. Zelensky doesn't matter. But again, I just think it's important that we don't lose sight of kind of this undercurrent battle that's going on. The idea that it was never, it wasn't never really Russiagate. It was about Ukraine. And we saw that when Trump raised the issue of Ukraine, and then we had this systemic, endemic response from the system to that. And then we move on and we end up in a proxy war. And there's a lot of people that have never been held account for what they've done. Everybody in the Biden administration, propping this and putting this forth that helped they made it happen. You had a tweet yesterday where you can describe it, but where Jeffrey Sachs was talking about kind of the same thing, a conversation that he had with Jake Sullivan. And that cut to the heart of some of the things that you and I have been saying forever on this.
It certainly does, because Jeffrey Sachs was in the European Parliament giving a speech there. And he revealed that before the Ukraine war started, he had been talking to the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. And he told Sullivan, as by the way, now we were all called conspiracy theorists for saying this. And then a couple of years later, the NATO Secretary General admitted it. This war was about NATO. So remember when we said this right at the start, like back in 2021, don't keep offering them NATO. Don't keep promising them NATO. You're just prodding the bear. You're poking the bear. You're causing a lot of problems.
Even doing it intentionally, because Ukraine wasn't going to even get into NATO. It was overt provocation.
This is what the whole thing was about with Jeffrey Sachs, because he said before the war, and so this is late 2021, he was talking to Sullivan about it. And he said, look, guys, just take NATO off the table and there's not going to be any war. And Sullivan said, there's going to be no NATO. Ukraine's not going to be in NATO. Okay, then why don't you say it?
Say
And
it.
Sullivan apparently said, no, we can't say it. We cannot say it publicly. So just because of some just stubbornness on the part of these Biden people, or idiocy and some
You're being way
nefariousness,
too
as we
kind. Not
say,
stubbornness, intent.
well, there's you always have a bit of everything. I mean, with Sullivan, I think he's just stupid. With other people, there's intent. With other people, there's nefariousness. I mean, you got the whole palette there. But I mean, no matter how we break that up, the fact of the matter is, as Sachs said. And by the way, I have no reason to not believe what he said, and Sullivan hasn't come forward and said that is not true. And the way he said it is pretty obvious that that's exactly what happened. So the fact that Sullivan would admit that there will never be a Ukraine in NATO, but at the same time he can't publicly say it, and that caused the war. By the way, and Sullivan also also said, no, there isn't going to be a war. No, he was wrong about that. He was wrong about everything, that guy. But just coming back to this, okay, well, we all agree NATO cannot be in Ukraine, or Ukraine cannot join NATO. This is just a bad idea. The Russians won't accept. It's just bad. Let's not do it. But let's not say it. Instead, let's say that Ukraine will be in NATO. What's the purpose of that? That's just poking the bear. It's worse than poking the bear. I mean, you're just kind of fanning the flames for World War III. And for what? There's nothing. I mean, there's no justification whatsoever for what these people did.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, has always been that there was a number of people in that administration that very much wanted the war, and they wanted, they wanted the proxy war. And they loved being able to wash the money through. Remember when you and I went looking, trying to figure out what U.S. aid had gotten out of this? Like, where did the Ukraine money go? And what we were able, it was really kind of eye-opening, because started looking through the Inspector General reports on the Ukraine aid, and you couldn't get a breakdown. They commingled it with the State Department. You couldn't see where it was going. It wasn't until we came across the congressional reports on Ukraine that we were actually able to find the breakdowns. And holy smokes, 40 billion of Ukraine aid is going into U.S. aid, and then of that, like 32 billion, so the vast bulk of it, goes into kind of a black box fund. You can't see where it's going. Huge amounts in the Department of Defense, and none of that's really been appropriately accounted for.
No, I agree. I mean, obviously there's the grift and so on, and it's a huge part of it. But when I said, what for? It's not only an outcome that was just a giant waste of money, but we were actually far worse off because of this whole Russia-China thing, which I'll come back to here in a moment. But just to stay on this point here, it's like what we got in terms of even the nefarious characters, the proxy warriors, the grifters, and all these kinds of people. Why not just give them the money? Just just pass them the money, just transfer them the billions or whatever that they funneled through Ukraine. Just cut out that part. Just give them money to shut them up. But then at least you don't have the geopolitical fallout. So it seems like now we have the worst of all worlds, where the grifters got the money via Ukraine, but at the same time, you also ended up with Russia and China in this very close alliance, which, to be honest, the only real kind of long-term impact of this war, apart, of course, from all the dead people and all those things, but I mean geopolitically, is the Russia-China alliance. It's a huge tragedy for Ukraine, but you know how these things work. I mean, the people will just move on, and that will all be forgotten, and they won't have their little flags in their Twitter feeds anymore in a few years' time, and well, whatever. And then everyone moves on. But what we're all left with, and by all I mean the world, is a China-Russia alliance, which did not have to be. These countries are not natural friends, not at all. I mean, they fought wars. There's no affinity whatsoever, not natural. But the West forced Russia into China's lap. And now we have the mess, because we have Russia with endless resources. I mean, people forget, why did Hitler go into the Soviet Union? He was friends with them. Well, not friends, but he had a pact with them. They had an agreement. Everything was fine. He needed the energy. He needed the raw materials. That's what he went for. That's what the whole thing was for. And And but for a very bad winter, he'd have succeeded, and then the world would be looking very, very different right now, because the Russian energy is just, and raw materials are just so, well, they're limitless. It's a huge country. And this is the one thing that China never had. They don't have
Yep.
those things. They don't have raw materials. They have endless kind of manpower. Their industrial base is unbelievable. I mean, just, they, for every one ship we build, they build like 300 or 400. And I'm not even exaggerating. It's incredible what they can produce. Munitions, whatever you want, they'll just produce it in mass, mass, mass. But you need the raw materials and the energy to do that. And well, now they have both. And
Right.
this
If
is
you just look at it
extremely bad.
logically, they're two puzzle pieces that just fit together perfectly in a dangerous combination, resources and manpower, and it's the last thing we want.
And the Ukraine war is what caused this.
Yep.
But then if we take a step back from that, still, RussiaGate caused this because of, well, we really described that, because it stopped Trump from doing anything diplomatically in his first term. And then if we take a step back from that, the Ukraine coup in 2014 caused this, because that's what then led in large part to RussiaGate, which then led to the war, and which then led to the China Russia alliance. And coming back to that 2014 coup, which, I mean, some people will say, well, you got to go back to 2008, where George W. Bush, idiotically, absolutely just mindless, brainless, offered Ukraine NATO entry. So in many ways, that's sort of the rocking the boat for no good reason other than, I don't know, just poking the bear, started in 2008. But to me, really 2014, I mean, they had a democratically elected leader in Ukraine, actually elected. And the guy was trying to balance that country. That country's always had issues because it's sort of split. It's not a natural country in its current form. It came out of the Soviet Union, where the Soviet Union added things. So some Russian bits were added, and it's sort of a construct in that way. So you have kind of half of it Russian, half of it Ukrainian. And it was always a balancing act. So they had a leader who was doing the balancing act. And what does Victoria Nuland, what does Joe Biden, what do these idiots from the European Union do? They go in there and organize a coup, or at least support a coup. And everything bad that's happened kind of to me anyway, if you're going to pick a starting point, was back in February of 2014.
And that was the same time. Well, they were already there, but our intelligence agencies really embedded themselves there. CIA was there, and then the FBI came in, and to this day still has a very heavy presence there, operating behind the scenes. There's a lot of manipulation that probably a lot of people are kind of unaware of that's gone on. But I guess coming back, to what's going on right now and what Trump is doing, it's an attempt at realigning the way things, like, let's get us back to the foreign policy that should have been. It's absolute insanity to me to think that you just construct a foreign policy where you can't politically have a dialogue with another nuclear superpower, that you just simply can't talk to them. And that was off the table for, I don't know, what would you say, maybe 6 years? Like half of the Trump administration and all of the Biden administration, where you just couldn't even talk to him. Trump had a couple meetings with Putin in the first part of his administration, but then things got so toxic it was impossible. It was kind of in the middle of his administration, if I remember.
Yeah, it was July 2018 is where that was kind of the end of any
Kind of the end of it,
possibility
right.
of talking to Russia. That was the Helsinki meeting. That was where that absolutely god-awful Dan Coates, the director of national intelligence, actually he went against Trump in public in Helsinki. You can't do that. You don't do that. And he did that. It was absolutely horrendous what that guy did. He should have been fired on the spot. Unfortunately, it took another year before that guy was fired. The hysteria.
Well,
The
he knew what he
Russiagate
was doing. They
hysteria was,
constructed such a toxic environment that he was able to do it by intent and knew he was probably going to get away with it, which he did.
that's right. But I remember that one story. I mean, we've probably talked about it before on I can't even recall it on a previous show here, but the hysteria was so incredible. I think it's worth recalling this just to place ourselves back in that 2018 timeframe. That Baron Trump, the son of Donald Trump, was 12 years old at the time, and he was a known soccer fan. Okay, he's a kid. He's a 12-year-old kid. While this thing was going on, while the summit was going on, there was a soccer World Cup in Russia taking place at the time. So Putin had brought an official ball. It's like giving a kid a ball, the official ball from that tournament. And the media had an apoplectic meltdown of the ball being a listening device and a whatever. And it was just, it's just horrendous, just even thinking back to that. And that happened with the backdrop of this whole Mueller thing. Every single day during that period, July 2018, the walls are closing in, they were trying to get Trump to do the Mueller interview to get him into some kind of perjury trap, and on and on. Every day we had the whole Michael Cohen thing. He got raided, and then he started to compose all these lies about Trump. Everything was aligned against Trump. And anyway, that was the kind of the final straw, Helsinki. And you're absolutely right. After that, July 2018, it was kind of over. So you have the world's biggest nuclear power, and we're not allowed to talk to them up until now, February of 2025. And Biden had a meeting, but that doesn't really, and that was just kind of neither here nor there. In terms of actually having a proper dialogue, 6 years, as you said, or 2018 to 27 years, really, right? 2025.
Yeah, and finally that's changed, and now because of the inability, where the press has been sort of, dying, frankly. They just don't have the effect, and Trump has the ability to go and do what he wants. I was thinking about that, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, but it's like we have kind of a new party that's yet to be given a name. I feel like, you look at this coalition where you have, RFK and Tulsi brought in, et cetera, others. You have the tech element that came from the left, and then you have the MAGA element. And when I was thinking about it, it just kind of dawned on me that what's really happened is it's not a party affiliation, is that we've left from the Republican Party. We still call ourselves Republicans, but effectively we left the established element of both parties behind and moved into sort of this new, yet to be named party that's effectively the people, and casting off all of kind of the rhinos, the neoconservatives, casting off the progressives and everything else, in line with all the corruption that we're seeing, that all of that is being discarded as the heart of the political strength. And suddenly, for the first time, the political strength is actually coming from the people as opposed to the establishment. So I guess that's kind of how I'm seeing things, is that everything Trump is doing is casting off that establishment element, kind of back to the people to some degree. And we're seeing that with the downsizing of government, which is, I still have to pinch myself every day to see what's going on. It's astonishing.
And parties change over time. I think we can keep the label. That doesn't matter. Democrats used to be the party against the intelligence community, not even that long ago, like 20, 30 years ago. They used to be the party of free speech, and those were their things. If we go back further, they used to be the segregation party before they became the anti-segregation party. We can go back to the Civil War. They used to be
the party of the blue-collar workers. Wasn't that long ago at all.
That's right, and that's shifted too. So West Virginia, probably the most Republican state right now, not that long ago was very, very blue. But
this is still different because you're blending two elements together. You're taking from both sides and you're pulling that into a new coalition. And yeah, the Republican name may stick. I'm not saying that, although I think it would be neat if we could come up with a new name. But it's casting off the shackles that came with both of those parties.
Yeah, no, that part is exactly right. And the longer it goes on, the less those old fake narratives about the Republicans are the warmongers, or the other one that didn't work at all during the 2024 election. Remember how the whole Bernie Sanders brigade, as well as Kamala and all these others, the party of billionaires and whatever. These are the old things they used to say, during the Bush years and all that. That doesn't work anymore because, well, it doesn't comport with the facts. The facts have moved on. Things have changed. The Republican Party is no longer the party of billionaires, and no longer the party of all these things that warmongers and neocons and all this kind of stuff. And so those labels, if you're unlucky enough to watch, CNN or MSNBC or whatever, they'll still throw that around. but it's just no longer working.
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you look at what's being sent out by a lot of the Democrats, they are trying to do that simply because of Elon. But that's a smoke screen that's got everything to do with what Elon's uncovering and nothing to do with the financial aspect of it. They're trying anything. They're just desperate. But the thing is, as you said, it's just not working. If you look under any of their tweets, it is just a litany of people calling them out for corruption. It's just absolutely not working. And they don't know what to do
No,
about it.
and to tie their flag to the mast of corruption is another. I mean, you just kind of they can't help themselves right now in terms of trying to stop what Doge is doing. When anyone with a functioning brain knows that this is not only just super great, but also super necessary. There's just simply no reason for funding transgender comic books in Peru or whatever. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of examples of all this kind of stuff. It has to go, and all reasonable people agree that it has to go. But if I could just kind of zoom out here again to the broader picture and where we started off from, I am just so grateful that all these lessons have been learned, and all the things that needed to be done in the first term and couldn't be done because of all the obstruction, the Russiagate, and so on, are being done, and not only domestically but internationally as well. And I think the most important thing among all those things is the focus on China. Everything I've seen out of J.D. Vance, out of Marco Rubio, out of President Trump, out of Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, out of all these guys in the past, week and a half, 2 weeks, very much also encapsulated by what Vance said in Munich, that speech that everyone had a meltdown over in the media, as well as what was said at the Russia-U.S. meeting in Saudi Arabia and so on. If you piece it all together, there's a very clear picture emerging, which is that the focus of the administration has moved to China. That's the enemy. That's where the problems are going to be. Europe is nothing, neither here nor there. I mean, there's like, as I said earlier, there's some ancestral ties, nice guy, nice people or whatever. But what is there to save? What is there to protect? What is the significance of Europe in geopolitical terms? It isn't. So that, I think, is really important. And one thing that was kind of shocking, not surprising, but in a way still kind of sad hearing it, is Rubio was talking about just resources. He said we just can't keep pouring resources into this European stuff. That's not where the action is, and we just don't have them anymore. What if there is? What if we need them over in the Pacific? We just don't have them. We're spending them on not only in monetary terms, but just in terms of actual military hardware. That was just very sobering to hear him say that we just can't keep going on like this. That's not where the problem is going to be, and that's not where the focus should be. So both sobering, but also very happy that this is that lesson has been finally learned. I mean, that's these absolute idiots, or worse, as you say, nefarious people over the past 4 years to put all their eggs in this Ukraine basket, when at the end of the day, it's kind of neither here nor there. Russia is not going to invade Western Europe. I mean, that was just such a stupid idea from the start. So as horrible as that is, and as sobering as it is to hear Rubio talk about, running out of resources, hardware, and so on, at least the corner has been turned. At least everyone is in the administration anyway is now focused on the big prize.
It's just back to common sense and putting resources where they need to be put. I mean, hopefully we'll even look at our relationship with the UN. I mean, that's not huge in dollars, but it's still, what, $14 billion or something like that. But just the shift in what was sort of a politically correct focus and getting back to basic fundamental reality. And I don't know about you, but I thought Vance's speech was actually kind of like gentle in some respects. It was fantastic, but he could have gone a lot harder if he wanted to. And now even just that has forced the bureaucrats in Brussels to basically defend censorship of free speech. And domestically at home, you've got Democrats on their back heels basically saying, hey, don't expose corruption, raise taxes, and don't downsize government. None of those platforms for either of those two elements they're losers on both sides.
I agree with you. The speech was actually super mild. He could have been a lot harsher in terms of the reality.
Yeah.
We were right, 5 minutes ago when we talked about this, but the reality is that Europe is completely insignificant. They don't have anything anyone needs, like apart from we mentioned some expensive luxury items or whatever, this or that, but this is replaceable stuff. They don't sit on resources that are absolutely important for national security or whatever. They don't have anything, and they're way behind in terms of technology, AI, all that kind of stuff. There's just nothing there. There's nothing of particular. Well, they got Ozempic, right? Ozempic came out of Denmark, so should be.
The
But
EU
you know what I
does.
mean?
There's
It's
no
sort of
reason for the European Union to exist. There just isn't.
exactly. But he didn't.
And
He didn't say that. He didn't say like we don't need you guys anymore. He worded it a different way, and I thought I was super well done. And I'm not even sure they understood. They got so hung up about the free speech thing, which of course was true, that I don't even think it's sunk in with them. I mean, not that there's a lot of very smart people over there, but the thing is, especially not in the political elites. Here's the thing: when he said there's the thing that binds us together is values. The thing that is unsaid in that statement is that we don't need you for the normal reasons you need stuff in geopolitics, which is usually resources. So that's what it was. It was like, it's just a moral tie because it's values. I would also add it's ancestral in many ways, even though the longer, we go on, the less that is, but fine. And then he said, of course, well, but since you guys don't no longer share the values either with your free speech stuff or your it's not just hate speech. I mean, some people in the U.S. try to push hate speech as well, but it's just insults. I mean, you get arrested for insults. So he was saying, since you guys no longer have the values, or it appears that way, or canceling elections in Romania and so on and so forth, well, what is there left? And and he's absolutely right. And I don't even think that's sunk in yet. They're still at the stage of grief where they're still trying to argue that no, our free speech is fine and so on. It's not, but that's where they are. At some point in the next few weeks or months or whatever, these European elites will understand that what he actually said is, you guys have nothing of any use to us. So we're just going to move on here.
it was always kind of like the big brother sort of patting the little brother on the shoulder, and all of a sudden there's no reason to have that relationship. And you're right. If they go back and look at it, he was making that very clear. The larger picture, I guess we just maybe we're in the midst of such a fundamental reshaping of everything happening all at once, in terms of our government, in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of our tax structure. Everything is happening at lightning speed. And it's probably going to take some decades for us to be able to look back and appreciate what's actually gone on and the reshaping that's happening. And everything that we do is rippling through these other countries. Nothing's in isolation. But basically Trump, for the first time, he's able to implement the things that he wants to implement, just essentially unfettered. And it's, thank God it's a return to common sense and a return to proper focuses, because we went so far off the rails over the last 4 years.
And thank God they're moving quickly, because as we've said here on this show for, I don't know, probably a year or so, whatever happens, if Trump gets in, you got to move quickly. And they're obviously doing that, and that's fantastic, because we don't know whether Trump has 4 years. We just don't know that. First of all, because you got the midterms, so you'll really only have 2 years, and then you don't know what's going to happen in the Senate. You don't know what's going to happen in Congress, and so on. But I'd say perhaps even more importantly, you don't know how they're going to regroup, what new things they're going to do, what new hoaxes they're going to come up with, how they're going to try and trip up Trump, as they did in the first term, where they were, they were locked and loaded. They were ready to go for him from day one, even before day one. This time they've been caught completely flat-footed. Probably for a long while they thought Kamala's going to, well, first of all, they thought he'd never come back in. Then they thought, we're going to push Kamala over the finish line. Then they thought, well, he's going to come in, but he's not going to be effective because, we're just going to obstruct him with this or that. And he's just kind of cut through all that and just gone straight for, the wins, what we keep calling the wins, win after win. But I think you and I are very aware of the fact that that's not going to go on forever. There's going to be a point in time where they're going to throw something that is going to slow things down. So we have to use the time right now because, it could be 6 months, it could be whatever, but I'd say probably 2 years.
Yeah, it's that has been one of the things that's been most heartening is just the idea that Trump has come out of the gate so strong. The attitude of move quickly and break things. Do it now. You may be able to continue doing it, but you don't know that with certainty. So you know you can do it right now, so do it. Make those structural changes. He even addressed that with talking about his executive orders. That's why he came out with a plethora of executive orders, because he could do it now and let those get codified over the 4 years. So, just keep up that same mantra, move quickly and break things.